That morning, I was rushing to sign an urgent contract when my private driver called and said, "Ma'am, the car has broken down. I'll call a taxi so you can make it to your meeting." I didn't suspect anything until I slid into the back seat and realized the driver was the former gardener from my house. During the ride, I asked why he had stopped working for us. He hesitated, clearly uneasy, then mentioned my daughter-in-law. What he said next left me completely shocked. "Thank you for being here. It really means more than you know. Before the story continues, please drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. We're building a community through shared stories. Also, please keep in mind this narrative includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and education. Any overlap with real names or situations is purely coincidental, but the insight is genuinely useful. I built my empire on two principles: trust your instincts and verify everything. On that sweltering September morning, both principles were about to be tested. My phone buzzed at 7:45. Robert Finley, my personal driver for 12 years, sounded panicked. "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm so sorry. The car won't start. Dead battery. I'm calling you a lift right now. You'll still make the 9:30 meeting." I didn't panic. I had 40 minutes. Clearwater Development was waiting on my signature for a $3.2 million contract. I grabbed my briefcase and walked toward the front gate of my Paradise Valley estate. The security guard nodded as I approached. "Ma'am, the lift is waiting outside. I've confirmed the driver's license plate." Our gated community didn't allow rideshare drivers past the entrance without resident confirmation via QR code. I stepped through the gate into the Arizona heat. A gray sedan idled by the curb. I opened the rear door and slid into the back seat, already pulling out my phone to review the contract terms. "Good morning, ma'am." The driver's voice made me freeze. I looked up. My breath caught. The man behind the wheel was Samuel Brooks, my former gardener, the one who'd tended the roses and citrus trees at my estate for 3 years, the one my daughter-in-law had fired 2 months ago. "Samuel," I said slowly. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his expression nervous. "Yes, ma'am, it's me." I set my phone down. "I didn't know you were driving for Lyft now. I had to find work after—" He trailed off, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "After I was let go." The air conditioning hummed. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly toward Scottsdale. "Samuel," I said carefully, "why were you fired? I was told you falsified your timesheet." His jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. We pulled onto the highway heading south toward Phoenix. Finally, he spoke. "Ma'am, I didn't falsify anything. That's what they said to get rid of me. But the real reason—" He hesitated. "The real reason is that I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Samuel's hands trembled slightly on the wheel. "About 2 months ago, I was trimming the bougainvillea outside the living room window. The window was open. I heard your daughter-in-law on the phone. She said—" He paused, swallowing hard. "She said, 'I love you too. Richard doesn't suspect anything. Once Dorothy signs, it'll be too late.'" The words hit me like a physical blow. Who was she talking to? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know his name," Samuel said. "But I saw him twice at the house after that. Both times your daughter-in-law introduced him as a legal consultant. He was about 45, wore expensive suits, and he had a distinctive birthmark, dark brown, oval-shaped, on the right side of his neck, just behind his ear." I stared at the back of Samuel's head, my mind racing. 2 weeks after I overheard that conversation, Samuel continued, "Your daughter-in-law caught me near the window again. She accused me of eavesdropping. The next week I was fired. Derek Walsh, the HR manager, showed me a timesheet with my signature, but I never signed it. They said I'd been falsifying my hours for months." My hands felt cold despite the desert heat. "Samuel," I said quietly, "why are you telling me this now?" He met my eyes in the mirror. "Because I think you're in danger, ma'am, and because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent." We pulled up to the office tower in downtown Phoenix. The Clearwater team was waiting inside. I handed Samuel my card. "Call me this afternoon, 2 o'clock. I want to hear everything." He nodded, his expression grateful. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the building. My $3 million deal suddenly felt insignificant. If Samuel was telling the truth, how long had my daughter-in-law been deceiving us all? The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor. I stepped into the Blackwood Manufacturing conference room at 9:30 sharp, my briefcase in one hand, my composure carefully intact. Mr. Patterson and his team from Clearwater Development stood as I entered. 3 men in tailored suits, leather portfolios, open coffee cups steaming on the polished mahogany table. "Mrs. Blackwood," Patterson said, extending his hand, "thank you for making time." "Not at all," I replied. "This partnership is important to both our companies." We sat. The contract sat on the table between us, $3.2 million to expand Blackwood Manufacturing's operations into California and Nevada. Patterson's assistant Caroline pulled up a presentation, charts, projections, revenue forecasts. As you can see, Patterson began, "The West Coast market shows a 23% increase in demand for industrial components. With your manufacturing capacity and our distribution network, we're looking at returns of 8 to 12 million over 3 years." I nodded my eyes on the screen, but I couldn't focus. Samuel's words echoed in my mind. "I think you should know something about your daughter-in-law." "Mrs. Blackwood." I blinked. Patterson was waiting. "I'm sorry," I said. "Could you repeat that?" "The payment schedule. Quarterly disbursements over 18 months. Is that acceptable?" I glanced at the timeline. "Yes, that's fine." But my mind was elsewhere. The man with the birthmark, the overheard phone call. Once Dorothy signs, it'll be too late. What was I about to sign? Caroline slid a document across the table. Page 12 outlines the indemnity clause. I scanned the page. My eyes moved over the words, but I wasn't absorbing them. I was thinking about Natalie, about the legal consultant Samuel had described. "Mrs. Blackwood, are you feeling all right?" Patterson's voice was concerned. I straightened my shoulders. "I'm fine, just a long morning." We discussed liability, insurance, delivery schedules. I answered questions. I negotiated adjustments. On the surface, I was the same Dorothy Blackwood who had built this company. Focused, sharp, in control. But inside, my mind was racing. Finally, Patterson placed a pen in front of me. "If everything looks good, we're ready to proceed." I picked up the pen. The contract was legitimate. I'd reviewed every page. But as I signed my name, Dorothy Blackwood, CEO, I thought about Samuel's warning. Was Natalie trying to trick me into signing something else? I set the pen down. Patterson smiled. We shook hands. "This is the beginning of something great," Patterson said. But as I walked back to my office, all I could think about was Samuel's warning. At 2 o'clock, I sat in a corner booth at the Phoenician Resort overlooking Camelback Mountain. Frank Morrison arrived 5 minutes later carrying a slim leather briefcase. Frank had been my private investigator for 12 years. Discreet, thorough, expensive. "Dorothy," he said, "what's going on?" I told him everything. Samuel's voice in the lift, the overheard phone call, the man with the birthmark, the suspicious meetings, the termination. Frank listened without interrupting. When I finished, he pulled out a notepad. "You want me to investigate Natalie?" "Yes, but carefully. I don't want Richard to know. Not yet." Frank nodded. "I'll need 3 to 4 days. I'll check surveillance footage from public cameras near your residence and around Kierland Commons. I'll review financial records for Natalie and Richard. I'll look into recent activity travel phone records if I can access them legally meetings." "How will you do this without alerting her?" "I have contacts, security companies, banking compliance officers." I handed him a photo of Natalie. The man Samuel described about 45 birthmark on the right side of his neck. "Can you identify him?" "If he's been to your residence or met Natalie in public, I'll find him." "I also need you to arrange a meeting with Samuel tomorrow. 9 a.m. Starbucks Reserve at Kierland Commons. I want to hear every detail." Frank made a note. "I'll be nearby in case you need backup." I stood. "Thank you, Frank." "Dorothy," he said quietly, "if Samuel is right, this could get ugly." "I know." That evening, I returned home. Natalie and Richard were having dinner in the formal dining room. I watched from the doorway. Natalie laughed at something Richard said. She touched his hand across the table. She looked radiant in a pale blue dress. Richard smiled at her the same smile he'd had since they married 5 years ago. I stepped into the room. "Good evening." "Mom." Richard stood pulling out a chair. "Join us. Natalie made chicken piccata." I sat. Natalie served me a plate. "How was your day, Mom?" Richard asked. "Productive," I said. "We signed the Clearwater contract." "That's wonderful," Natalie said brightly. $3 million, right?" I watched her carefully. She held her wine glass with steady hands. Her smile never wavered. But when her phone buzzed on the table, she glanced at it, and for just a split second, her expression changed. Guarded. Tense. She turned the phone face down. "Excuse me," she said. "I need to check on dessert." She left the room, taking her phone with her. Richard didn't notice. He was talking about a supplier contract. But I noticed. I thought of Samuel's words, the man with the birthmark. "Once Dorothy signs, it'll be too late." I looked at Natalie's empty chair. Tomorrow I would have answers. If Samuel was right, how do I tell Richard his wife has been betraying us all? At 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, I arrived at the Starbucks Reserve at Kierland Commons. Samuel Brooks was already there, sitting at a corner table near the window, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. I ordered a coffee and joined him. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Blackwood," he said quietly. "Thank you for trusting me," I replied. Samuel pulled a worn envelope from his jacket pocket. Inside were 2 items, a photo of his old work schedule proving he'd been on site the days he claimed, and a printed receipt from a security camera vendor evidence he'd asked about installing a personal camera after feeling unsafe. "I brought these in case you didn't believe me," he said. I set the envelope aside. "I believe you, Samuel. Now tell me everything. Start from the beginning." He took a breath. June 10th, about 2 p.m. I was trimming the bougainvillea outside the living room window. The window was cracked open because of the heat. I heard your daughter-in-law on the phone. "What did she say?" "She said, 'I love you too. Richard doesn't suspect anything. We just have to be patient.' Then she laughed. It wasn't the way she talks to Mr. Richard." My stomach tightened. June 17th. A man came to the house. Your daughter-in-law introduced him to me as a legal consultant. They went into the study for about an hour. When they came out, she walked him to his car. I was watering the driveway plants. I saw them standing close together. Too close. Describe him. About 45 years old. Tall, maybe 6'1". Gray suit, expensive shoes, dark hair starting to gray at the temples, and he had a birthmark, dark brown, oval-shaped about the size of a quarter. Right here. Samuel touched the right side of his neck, just behind his ear. When he turned his head in the sunlight, it was very noticeable. I made a mental note. Frank would need this description. June 24th. The same man came back. This time he brought a leather portfolio with a logo on it. I recognized it. It was the Blackwood Manufacturing logo. My blood ran cold. "You're saying he works for my company?" "I think so, ma'am. I didn't see his name, but the portfolio was definitely from your office." Samuel continued. July 8th. I was working near the pool house. I heard them talking on the patio. The man said something about power of attorney and transfer of assets. Your daughter-in-law said, "Once Dorothy signs, we'll have everything." I gripped the edge of the table. July 15th. Your daughter-in-law caught me near the window. She accused me of eavesdropping. I tried to explain I was just working, but she looked angry, afraid. And then, August 8th, Derek Walsh called me into his office. He showed me a timesheet with my signature, but I never signed it. He said I'd been falsifying hours for months. I tried to explain, but he cut me off. He said I was terminated immediately. Security escorted me out. Samuel's voice broke slightly. I lost my job, my income. I couldn't find work for 6 weeks because of the termination on my record. That's why I'm driving for Lyft now. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry, Samuel. You were telling the truth and you were punished for it." He looked up, his eyes watery. "Do you believe me, ma'am?" "I do, and I'm going to find out who that man is. If he works for my company, I'll know by the end of the week." Samuel exhaled relief, flooding his face. I stood. "Go home, Samuel. Stay safe. I'll call you when I have answers." As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and called Frank Morrison. "Frank, I need you to check all male employees at Blackwood Manufacturing, age 40 to 50. Look for anyone with a prominent birthmark on the right side of the neck, and cross-reference anyone who's had recent contact with Natalie." Frank's voice was grim. "I'm on it." I hung up and stared at the Arizona sky. Someone inside my own company was helping my daughter-in-law steal from me, and I was going to find out who. Frank Morrison arrived at my home office at exactly 5 o'clock Wednesday evening. I'd been watching the clock for 20 minutes, unable to focus on anything else. "You found him," I said as he settled into the chair across from my desk. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a photograph, a professional headshot from our employee files. Mid-40s, confident smile, well-groomed. And there, visible even in the photo, was the birthmark on the right side of his neck. "Marcus Donovan, 43 years old, your chief financial officer, 8 years with Blackwood Manufacturing." I stared at the photo. Marcus, our CFO, the man I'd promoted twice. "The birthmark matches Samuel's description exactly," Frank continued. "And Dorothy Marcus and Richard have been best friends for 15 years. University of Arizona, same graduating class. Richard personally recommended him for the CFO position." My hands felt cold. "Richard recommended him?" "Yes. HR records show Richard vouched for him, called him trustworthy, brilliant with numbers. Marcus, Richard's best friend, the man my son called his brother." "What else?" Frank opened his tablet showing surveillance footage. "Kierland Commons, August 15th, 7:45 p.m. The video showed the outdoor seating area. Natalie sat across from a man, Marcus. They talked quietly, leaned close. At one point, he reached across and took her hand. "I have 40 minutes of footage." They stayed together over an hour. "I don't want to see more." Frank closed the tablet. "There's something else. I contacted a source at the county notary office. On August 18th, a power of attorney was notarized with your name. It grants Alpha Holding, LLC authority to manage and transfer your real estate holdings." My pulse hammered. "I never signed anything," I suspected. "The notary's records show you were supposedly there at 2:30 p.m., but your calendar shows you were in a board meeting in Phoenix. 40 people can confirm it." "The signature is forged." "Almost certainly. I need a handwriting expert to verify, but yes, someone created fraudulent documents in your name and had them officially notarized." I walked to the window, looking out at the desert landscape. 8 years. Marcus had been part of this company, part of our family, for 8 years. "Frank, I need you to work with Howard Brennan and Barbara Simmons. Howard's my attorney. He needs to see that power of attorney immediately. Barbara can check if Marcus has manipulated financial records. I need everything by Saturday." "You'll have it." Frank hesitated. "When will you tell Richard?" "When I have all the evidence, when there's no doubt. Because telling my son that his best friend and his wife are conspiring against us..." I stopped throat tight. "It will destroy him." After Frank left, I sat alone as twilight gathered. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf where family photos stood. There, in a silver frame, Richard and Marcus, in graduation robes 15 years ago, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. I picked up the frame, studying Marcus's face. Had he planned this even then, or had betrayal come later, an opportunity he couldn't resist? Marcus, the man my son calls his brother, the man I trusted with our finances. How could you? I set the frame down. The employee photo still lay on my desk, Marcus's confident smile mocking me. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Howard and Barbara. We'd build an airtight case. And then somehow, I'd find the words to tell Richard that the two people he loved most had betrayed him. Thursday morning, I sat at my desk reviewing Barbara Simmons's latest financial report when my assistant knocked. "Mrs. Blackwood, your daughter-in-law is here to see you." I looked up surprised. Natalie rarely visited the office. "Send her in." Natalie entered with her usual bright smile, carrying a leather portfolio. She wore a tailored cream blazer, the picture of polished confidence. "Good morning, Mom," she said warmly. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the chair. "What brings you here?" She sat placing the portfolio on my desk. "I wanted to follow up on the estate planning conversation we had last month. Richard and I have been working with a financial advisor about optimizing the family's assets for tax purposes." I kept my expression neutral. "Go on." "The advisor recommends restructuring some of the real estate holdings," Natalie continued, "specifically transferring 3 properties into a family trust, Alpha Holding, LLC. It would significantly reduce our tax liability and protect the assets from any future litigation. Alpha Holding, the name Samuel had mentioned. What exactly are you proposing? I asked calmly. Natalie opened the portfolio and slid a document across the desk. This is an asset verification form. The bank requires it to finalize the trust setup and approve a line of credit secured by the properties. You just need to sign here confirming ownership of the 3 properties listed. I picked up the document, scanning it carefully. 3 properties, Scottsdale, Tempe, Paradise Valley. Total estimated value $18 million. Why does the bank need my signature? I asked. Because you're the primary owner, Natalie explained. The bank won't release the tax optimization without direct confirmation. It's standard procedure for estate planning at this level. I set the document down. And when does this need to be signed? Natalie's smile tightened slightly. Ideally within the next week. The tax deadline is approaching, and if we miss it, we'll lose the optimization window for this fiscal year. I leaned back in my chair. I'd like Howard Brennan to review this before I sign anything. Natalie's expression flickered just for a moment. Of course. But Mom, this is really just a formality. Richard and I have already reviewed everything with the advisor. Howard will tell you the same thing. I'm sure he will, I said. But I don't sign financial documents without legal review, you understand. Natalie stood her smile firmly back in place. Absolutely, I'll leave this with you. Just let me know when you've had a chance to review it with Howard. She left the portfolio on my desk and walked out. The moment the door closed, I picked up my phone and called Howard Brennan. Howard, I need you in my office, now. 30 minutes later, Howard sat across from me, the document spread on the desk between us. This isn't an estate planning form, Howard said flatly. This is an asset verification for a secured loan. If you sign this, you're confirming that Alpha Holding, LLC, has authority to use these properties as collateral for a $15 million line of credit. My stomach turned cold. And if Alpha Holding defaults, you lose the properties. I stared at the signature line where Natalie had placed a small yellow tab. Samuel's warning echoed in my mind. Once Dorothy signs, it'll be too late. Howard, I said quietly, I need you to investigate Alpha Holding LLC. I need to know who owns it when it was registered and who's been accessing the account. Howard nodded. I'll have answers by tomorrow. I looked out the window at the Phoenix skyline. Natalie was desperate. She was afraid I'd find out, which meant I was running out of time. Saturday morning at 10, my home office felt like a war room. Frank Morrison, Howard Brennan, and Barbara Simmons sat around my desk folders and laptops spread before us. Let's start with what we know, I said. Frank opened his tablet. Kierland Commons footage is definitive. August 15th, 92 minutes together, at 8:17. PM Marcus kissed Natalie, intimate, not friendly. They held hands throughout. He pulled up more documents. 6 meetings over 3 months, coffee shops, hotels, always when Richard was working or traveling. And I have audio from August 20th, Natalie's phone call. She says, I love you too, Marcus. Richard suspects nothing. The words hung heavy. Barbara shook her head. Howard. My attorney opened his file. The August 18th power of attorney is forged. Handwriting expert confirmed it's skilled forgery, but not perfect. Your calendar shows you were in a board meeting with 40 witnesses when you supposedly visited the notary. He pulled out another document. Alpha Holding LLC was registered August 1st. Marcus Donovan is managing member, though his name is buried through a third-party law firm. Their plan transfer your 3 largest properties, $18 million total, into Alpha Holding, then use them as collateral for loans. They'd extract the equity while leaving you with worthless assets. Barbara, the financials, my backup CFO, looked grim. Marcus moved $200,000 from company reserves into his personal account over 4 months, disguised as legal consulting fees, but the firm doesn't exist. It's a shell he created. She continued, Derek Walsh in HR modified Samuel Brooks's termination records. The original showed Samuel was fired on Natalie's direct request with no investigation. Derek altered it to appear legitimate. I stood and walked to the window. Somewhere out there, Richard was going about his Saturday unaware his wife and best friend were destroying everything. So we have video evidence, audio confirmation, embezzlement, proof, forged documents, and conspiracy to steal $18 million. I turned back. What's our move, Orisao? Howard leaned forward. Criminal charges, fraud, forgery, embezzlement. Marcus faces 5 to 7 years, Natalie 3 to 5 as accomplice. Or handle it privately. Force them out with threat of prosecution. Cleaner, faster protects Richard from public trial. The private option. What does it look like? Frank laid out a timeline. Tomorrow evening, tell Richard everything, show him evidence. Then confront Marcus and Natalie together. Give them the choice, leave quietly or face charges. Monday morning, freeze Marcus's accounts, terminate Derek Walsh file to void the fraudulent power of attorney. And Natalie, divorce papers ready, no settlement, no assets. She leaves with nothing. I looked at them. Frank Howard, Barbara people, loyal to me for years, who'd worked tirelessly to uncover truth. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., I tell Richard first alone before anything else. After they left, I sat surrounded by evidence of betrayal. My eyes found a photograph on the bookshelf, Richard at 7, gap-toothed smile holding a debate trophy. So proud, so innocent. I'd trusted my instincts when Samuel came to me. I'd verified everything just like I'd built my career doing. And now I had the truth. The truth came with a terrible price. Tomorrow night, I'll break my son's heart to save his future. Sunday evening, 6 o'clock. 2 hours before Richard would arrive. 2 hours before I would shatter my son's world. I sat alone in my office, the leather photo album open on my lap. Tonight, I needed to remember why this was going to hurt so much. The first photograph, Richard and Marcus 15 years ago, graduation day at University of Arizona. Both in navy robes, mortarboards tilted at cocky angles, arms around each other's shoulders. Richard's grin was wide and proud. Marcus looked almost shy, as if he couldn't believe his luck. I remembered that day. Marcus's parents had died 2 years earlier. He'd gone through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, completely alone. When the ceremony ended, he stood apart from other graduates celebrating with families. So I walked over and hugged him. You did it. Your parents would be so proud. He'd looked at me with such gratitude. Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood, for treating me like family. And I had. From that day forward, Marcus was part of our lives. I turned the page. Christmas dinner 10 years ago. The long table set with china and candles. Richard and Marcus laughing at opposite ends. Marcus had brought wine, helped me cook, told stories about his accounting firm. Before he left that night, he hugged me. Thank you for this. I don't have anywhere else to go for holidays. You've been like a second mother to me. Like a second mother. I'd glowed with that. I'd been so happy to give him what he'd lost. Another page. The wedding photograph 5 years ago. Richard in his tuxedo, Natalie in white, Marcus as best man. His hand on Richard's shoulder, both grinning. I could still hear Richard's rehearsal dinner toast. Marcus isn't just my best friend. He's the brother I never had. I can't imagine my life without him. The guests had applauded. Marcus had looked genuinely moved. Had it all been a lie, or had something changed? Had Marcus planned this from the beginning, or had betrayal come later when he saw opportunity? I closed the album and set it aside. 8 years ago, when my CFO retired, I'd offered Marcus the position. He'd proven himself brilliant, earned the promotion. Richard had been thrilled. See, Mom, I told you Marcus was special. Special. Special enough to forge my signature. Special enough to steal $200,000. Special enough to seduce my son's wife. The desert sunset painted the sky orange and purple through my window, beautiful and harsh like everything in Arizona. In 2 hours, Richard would sit here, and I would tell him his wife was having an affair with his best friend, that together they'd planned to steal $18 million, that the 2 people he loved most had been betraying him for months. My son would be devastated twice over, not just a cheating wife, but his brother, the man he'd trusted since college, the man who'd stood beside him at his wedding. I pulled my journal from the desk and wrote, "Sometimes loving your child means telling them the truth that will hurt them. It means trusting they're strong enough to heal. It means choosing their future over their present happiness." Richard was strong. He'd inherited my resilience. He would survive this. He would rebuild. But first he had to know. I called Richard's number. He answered cheerfully. "Hey, Mom, what's up? Richard, can you come to the house tonight around 8? Just you, I need to talk with you alone." A pause. "Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, but there's something important we need to discuss." "Should I be worried?" "Yes, you should be terrified. Just come at 8, sweetheart." "Okay, I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, the album beside me. I opened it one last time to that graduation picture, Richard and Marcus young and hopeful, believing their friendship would last forever. I closed the album gently. Tonight, everything changes. Everything ends. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sorry Marcus turned out to be someone we couldn't trust, but I won't let him destroy you, even if telling you the truth breaks your heart. If you're still here, tell me in the comments. If you were in my place standing on the edge of a truth that could shatter your child's heart, would you tell them everything or stay silent to protect them? And please note the next part of this story includes some dramatized elements for reflection and storytelling. If this isn't something you'd like to continue with, you're welcome to stop watching here. Richard arrived at exactly 8 o'clock. When I opened the door, his face was tight with concern. "Mom, what's going on?" "Come inside, let's talk in the living room." I led him to the private sitting room and closed the door. "Sit down, Richard. I have something difficult to tell you." He sat on the sofa watching me carefully. "You're scaring me." "Do you remember Samuel Brooks? He used to maintain our gardens. The guy who got fired for falsifying timesheets, that's what Natalie told us. But Richard Samuel wasn't fired for fraud. He was fired because he discovered something Natalie didn't want anyone to know." Richard's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I took a breath. Richard Natalie is having a relationship with someone else. For 3 seconds, he didn't move. Then he stood abruptly. "What? No, that's impossible. Where is this coming from?" Samuel overheard conversations. I hired Frank Morrison to investigate. We have evidence, surveillance footage, audio recordings. They could be misinterpreting something. Maybe she was meeting a friend. "Richard." I pulled out my iPad. "You need to see this. Surveillance video from Kierland Commons, August 15th. His hands trembled. "I don't want to." "You need to." I pressed play. The video showed the outdoor seating area at Kierland Commons, evening yellow lights overhead. Timestamp 7:45 p.m. Natalie sat at a corner table in her blue dress. Across from her, a man in a gray suit leaned forward, talking intently. At 7:52, Natalie laughed. She reached across the table and touched his hand, fingers intertwined. At 7:58, the man leaned closer. He cupped her face and kissed her. Not a friendly kiss, long, intimate. 5 seconds, 6, 7. When they pulled apart, Natalie was smiling, happy. The video continued. They sat close, talking, touching. At 8:04, they walked toward the parking garage, his arm around her waist. I stopped the video. Richard's face had gone white. His hands shook. "No, that can't be." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Maybe it's not what it looks like." "Richard, we have audio too from August 20th. She tells him she loves him. She says you don't suspect anything." He crumpled, then burying his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I moved beside him, putting my arm around him. For 5 long minutes, I held my son while he cried. Finally, his voice came out rough and broken. "Who is he?" I'd been dreading this moment. "Richard." "Who is he, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "It's Marcus. Marcus Donovan." Complete terrible silence. Then Richard looked at me, face wet with tears, expression full of incomprehension. Marcus, my best friend." I nodded. "Marcus Donovan, the guy who stood beside me at my wedding, who I brought into this family, into the company." He looked at me with devastated eyes. Why would he do this? I had no answer that would make it hurt less. Richard stood suddenly stumbling to the wall. He slid down to sit on the floor, shaking his head. My wife, my best friend. Both of them. He pulled his knees up, wrapping his arms around them. Marcus, the brother I never had. His voice broke completely. "Richard, there's more. It's not just the affair. More." His laugh was bitter, broken. What could possibly be worse than this? Richard sat on the edge of the couch, staring at his hands. 10 minutes had passed since I'd shown him the video. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. "There's more," I said gently. He looked up, his eyes red. "More." I opened a second folder Howard had prepared and slid it across the coffee table. "This isn't just an affair, Richard. It's theft, fraud, a carefully planned conspiracy." Richard picked up the first document, his hands trembling. "Alpha Holding, LLC," I said. "Registered August 1st. The beneficial owner hidden behind 2 shell companies is Marcus Donovan." Richard stared at the page. "Alpha Holding? I've never heard of it." Neither had I, until Frank started digging. I placed another document in front of him. "This is a forged power of attorney dated August 18th. It claims I authorized the transfer of 3 properties worth $18 million into Alpha Holding." Richard's jaw clenched. "You didn't sign this." "No. Howard verified it with a handwriting expert. On August 18th, I was in a board meeting with 40 witnesses." I slid the third document toward him. "Here's the plan, Richard. Transfer the properties into Alpha Holding. Use them as collateral to borrow $15 million. By the time we discovered the fraud, the money would be gone wired to offshore accounts, and we'd be left with nothing but debt." Richard set the papers down, his face hardening. "But that's not the worst part," I said quietly. I handed him the final document. "This is a projection Barbara Simmons prepared. If Marcus and Natalie had succeeded, the bank would have foreclosed on the properties within 6 months. The company would have collapsed under the debt. And you, Richard, would have been personally liable for $12 million because your name is on the corporate guarantee." Richard's eyes widened. "What? Marcus had you sign a corporate guarantee last year," I said. "Do you remember he told you it was routine paperwork for the new credit line?" Richard's face went white. I signed it." He said it was standard. "It wasn't," I said. "Marcus set you up. If this scheme had worked, you would have been drowning in debt while he and Natalie disappeared with $15 million. Richard stood abruptly, his fists clenched. "He was going to destroy me." "Yes." Richard paced the room, his breathing ragged. "Marcus, my best friend, he didn't just betray me, he was going to ruin me." I watched him carefully. The grief was still there, but now something else was rising. Anger, determination. Richard stopped pacing and turned to me. "What do we do?" "We confront them," I said. "Tonight, 10 o'clock. Here, you, me, Marcus." Richard's voice was cold, now controlled. "I want to hear it from him. I want him to look me in the eye and admit what he did." I nodded. "Then call him." Richard pulled out his phone. His hands were steady now. He dialed. "Marcus," Richard said when the call connected. His voice was icy. "I need you at my mother's house. 10 o'clock tonight. It's urgent." There was a pause. I couldn't hear Marcus's response, but I saw Richard's jaw clench. "No," Richard said. "It can't wait. 10 o'clock. Don't be late." He ended the call and looked at me. "He's coming." I stood. "Good, we'll be ready." Richard's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, "On my way." Outside headlights swept across the driveway. "He's here early," Richard said, his voice tight. I smoothed my hands over my skirt. "Then let's finish this." Marcus arrived at 10 sharp. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the familiar sound of his Audi engine cutting through the desert night. Richard stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. He hadn't said much since I'd shown him the documents an hour earlier, the forged signature, the shell company, the plan to drain $18 million from the family he claimed to love. "Mom," Richard said quietly, "are you sure about this?" I nodded. "I'm sure." The doorbell rang. Frank Morrison, standing just outside the study, gave me a small nod. He'd been with me for 12 years, and tonight he'd deliver the knockout blow. I opened the door myself. Marcus stood there in a navy polo and khakis, holding a bottle of wine, one of the expensive Napa Reds he always brought when he visited. His face was relaxed, expectant. He had no idea what was coming. "Dorothy," he said warmly. "Thanks for inviting me over. Richard said you wanted to talk." "Come in," I said. He followed me into the study. Richard turned from the window, and Marcus's smile faltered when he saw his best friend's expression, cold, flat, unreadable. "Rich," Marcus said carefully. "What's going on?" Richard didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He set it on the desk, tapped the screen, and turned it toward Marcus. The video played. It was grainy shot from across a parking lot, but the figures were unmistakable. Marcus and Natalie standing between two cars at Kierland Commons. The timestamp read August 15th, 7:58 p.m. Marcus leaned in, kissed her, his hand on the small of her back. Natalie smiled, said something, and Marcus laughed. The video ended. Marcus stared at the screen, his face draining of color. Then he looked up at Richard, and for the first time in 15 years of friendship, I saw fear in his eyes. "Rich, don't," Richard said, his voice quiet and hard. "Don't lie to me." Marcus exhaled slowly. He set the wine bottle down on the side table, rubbed his face with both hands, and finally nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay, yes, Natalie and we've been seeing each other. It started about a year ago. I know it was wrong. I know I betrayed you. But Rich, you have to understand she came to me. She was lonely. You were always working, always traveling, and she just—" "Stop," Richard said. Marcus stopped. Richard looked at me. I stepped forward, placing a manila folder on the desk. "This isn't just about the affair, Marcus," I said. "It's about what you did to my company, to my family." Marcus frowned. "What are you talking about?" I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, incorporation documents, and a forged power of attorney bearing my signature. "Alpha Holding LLC," I said. "Registered in Delaware on August 1st. You're listed as the managing member. The company was created to hold 3 properties worth $18 million. Properties you plan to steal by forging my signature on a power of attorney." Marcus's eyes widened. That's not true. I don't know what you're—" "Don't insult me," I said coldly. "I have proof." Frank Morrison stepped into the room. He carried a tablet and a small recorder, which he placed on the desk with deliberate care. "Hello, Marcus," Frank said. His voice was calm, professional. "We've met before at the company holiday party last December. I'm sure you don't remember me." Marcus stared at him, speechless. Frank tapped the tablet. "In January, Mrs. Blackwood implemented a corporate device monitoring policy. All executives signed the acknowledgement, including you. The policy allows the company to monitor activity on company-issued laptops for compliance and security purposes." He turned the tablet toward Marcus. On the screen was a login log, time-stamped and detailed. "Your laptop," Frank continued, "recorded every keystroke when you accessed an anonymous email account on July 10th. That account was used to authorize a $50,000 transfer from Blackwood Manufacturing's legal reserve to Blue Horizon Legal Services, a shell company registered under your cousin's name in Delaware." Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. Frank tapped the screen again. "On July 23rd, you authorized another $75,000. On August 5th, another $75,000. Total $200,000. The money was routed through Blue Horizon into Alpha Holding, then transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We froze the accounts on Friday," I said. "The court issued a temporary restraining order based on the evidence Frank gathered. You won't see a dime of that money, Marcus." Marcus's face crumbled. He sank into the chair, head in his hands. "I trusted you," Richard said, his voice breaking. "You were my best friend, my brother, and you tried to destroy us." Marcus looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Rich, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. You have 2 choices," I said. "Sign a resignation as CFO. Sign a separation agreement with Natalie. Leave Arizona within 48 hours. Or I call the FBI and you face 7 to 10 years for wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." Marcus stared at me. Then he nodded. "I'll sign," he whispered. Frank slid the papers across the desk. Marcus signed. Then he left. Richard stood alone in the study, tears in his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "why do people we trust always betray us?" I had no answer. At 11 o'clock, Natalie came home. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Richard and I sat in the living room waiting. Frank Morrison stood near the staircase, silent. Natalie appeared in the doorway, her purse over her shoulder. She wore a pale gray coat, her hair pulled back. She froze when she saw us. "Richard," her voice was uncertain. "You're here." Richard's voice was flat. "I know everything, Natalie." Her smile faltered. What do you know?" "We just spoke with Marcus," I said calmly. Natalie's face went pale. The purse slipped from her shoulder. She sank into the armchair, her hands gripping the armrests. I can explain. Explain what? Richard's voice cracked. The affair. The plan to steal $18 million. Firing Samuel to cover your tracks. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. You have to understand. This marriage, I wasn't happy. Richard, you were never home. It was always work. I felt invisible. So you chose to destroy me, Richard said bitterly. Natalie shook her head. No, it wasn't like that. Marcus. He understood me. He listened. And then he told me about the plan. He said we could be together. He said we could have a future. So you're blaming Marcus? Richard's voice rose. Natalie sobbed. He didn't force me, but he made it sound so easy. He said Dorothy would never notice. He said the company had so much money that no one would miss a few properties. I leaned forward. You didn't think it would hurt anyone, Natalie? You conspired to forge my signature. You created a fraudulent company. You fired an innocent man. You lied to my son for months. Natalie looked at me, panic in her eyes. Please, Mom, I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. But please don't destroy me. I placed a check on the coffee table. $50,000. Natalie stared at it. Then something shifted in her expression. Anger. 50,000, she said sharply. That's all after 7 years of marriage. After 7 years of lying, Richard corrected coldly. Natalie ignored him, her eyes on me. You're worth hundreds of millions, Dorothy, and you're offering me 50,000. That's insulting. I leaned forward, my voice ice cold. You're right. It is insulting. Just like forging my signature. Just like sleeping with my son's best friend. Just like plotting to steal $18 million from the family that welcomed you. I picked up my phone. I have the district attorney on speed dial. One call and you'll be arrested within the hour. Fingerprinted, mugshot, booked into Maricopa County Jail. Your face will be on every news channel by tomorrow morning. Natalie's face drained of color. This $50,000 is not a gift, I continued. It's a head start. Money for a plane ticket, money for rent while you figure out what to do, money to help you disappear before the subpoena arrives. I slid the divorce papers across the table. If you stay to fight for assets, if you try to claim alimony or the house, I will destroy you. You'll end up with nothing and a criminal record. Natalie stared at the papers, her breath short. You have two options, I said. Take the $50,000, sign the divorce papers, forfeit all marital assets, leave Arizona within 72 hours, or refuse and I'll call the DA right now. You'll be arrested tonight. You'll spend the weekend in jail. I leaned closer. But here's what I want you to understand, Natalie. This isn't about money. It never was. It's about honor. It's about integrity. It's about the kind of person you choose to be when no one is watching. I paused, letting the words sink in. You chose deception. You chose greed. You chose betrayal. And those choices have consequences. My son deserved better than you. He deserved honesty. He deserved loyalty. He deserved a partner who would stand beside him, not someone who would sell him out for money, and a man who was never worthy of either of you. Natalie's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Tears fell onto the pages as she signed. I placed the check in front of her. This is your last chance, Natalie. Use it wisely. She stood clutching the check and papers. She didn't look at Richard. She didn't look at me. She walked to the door, her steps unsteady. Natalie, I called. She stopped her back to us. 72 hours, I said. If you're still in Arizona after that, I will have you arrested. Do you understand? She nodded without turning around. Then she opened the door and disappeared into the night. The room was silent except for Richard's breathing. He sat down slowly, his head in his hands. Mom, I feel like I've lost everything. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders. No, son, you still have me. You still have this family. And you still have your integrity. That's more than Natalie will ever have. He leaned against me, his body shaking. Outside, the desert night stretched endlessly. The battle was over, but the wounds would take time to heal. Monday morning arrived with the brittle clarity of a desert sunrise. At 9 o'clock, I walked into Howard Brennan's office in downtown Phoenix. The conference room was ready. divorce papers, resignation documents, and 2 sealed envelopes containing settlement checks. Howard stood when I entered. "Everything's prepared, Dorothy. Natalie is in the waiting room." I nodded. "Let's begin." Natalie entered a moment later. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. She sat across from me without a word. Howard slid the documents across the table. "Ms. Prescott, these are the divorce papers. You will forfeit all marital assets. This second document is a no-contact agreement. You may not contact Richard Blackwood, Dorothy Blackwood, or any member of the Blackwood family. Violation of this agreement will result in immediate criminal prosecution for fraud and conspiracy." Natalie picked up the pen, her hand trembling. She signed each page without reading them. I placed the envelope on the table. $50,000. Use it to build a better life. Don't waste it. Natalie looked up, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. I'm sorry." I held her gaze. "You made your choices, Natalie. Now you have to live with them." She stood clutching the envelope and left without looking back. At 10 o'clock, Marcus arrived. He wore a suit, his expression guarded. He sat in the same chair Natalie had occupied an hour earlier. Howard repeated the process. "Mr. Donovan, this is your resignation as Chief Financial Officer of Blackwood Manufacturing. You will receive no severance package. You may collect your personal belongings from the office today. This second document is a no-contact agreement with the same terms as Ms. Prescott's." Marcus signed quickly, his jaw tight. Howard continued, "Your bank accounts will remain frozen until the Alpha Holding matter is resolved. The court will determine restitution for the $200,000 you misappropriated." Marcus said nothing. I leaned forward. "Marcus, I once thought of you as family. I welcomed you into my home. I trusted you with my company. Now I feel more disappointed than angry." Marcus finally looked at me. His voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood." "I hope you are," I said quietly, "because you'll carry this with you for the rest of your life." Marcus stood, his shoulders slumped, and walked out. At 10:30, Howard placed the final document in front of me. "Petition to void the forged power of attorney. I'll file this with the court this afternoon." I signed my name with steady hands. "An Alpha Holding." "Frozen," Howard confirmed. "The assets will be returned to your control within 30 days. I nodded. "Thank you, Howard, for everything." I returned to the Blackwood Manufacturing office just before 11. Barbara Simmons was waiting in my office, her expression calm but alert. "It's done," I said. "Call a senior staff meeting. I need to make an announcement." 10 minutes later, I stood in the conference room in front of 20 employees. Their faces were tense, uncertain. "I want to inform you that Marcus Donovan has resigned as Chief Financial Officer effective immediately," I said. "Derek Walsh, our HR manager, has also been terminated for policy violations. Barbara Simmons will serve as interim CFO while we search for a permanent replacement." There was a ripple of shocked whispers, but no one asked questions. I'd kept my tone professional, matter-of-fact. The details, Richard's pain, the betrayal, the conspiracy, would remain private. "Thank you all for your continued dedication," I concluded. "We will move forward together." Back in my office, I sat at my desk and pulled out my phone. I dialed Samuel Brooks's number. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Blackwood?" "Samuel," I said. "Can you come to my office this afternoon? I have an offer for you." There was a pause. "Of course. What time?" 2 o'clock, I said. "And Samuel, thank you for your honesty, for your courage. You saved this family." His voice softened. "I'm just glad I could help, ma'am." I ended the call and looked out the window at the Phoenix skyline. The battle was over. Natalie was on her way to California. Marcus would leave for Texas within 48 hours. But the real work, rebuilding trust, healing Richard's wounds, was only beginning. At 2 o'clock, Samuel Brooks arrived at the Blackwood Manufacturing office. He wore his best shirt and pressed slacks, his hands fidgeting with a folder proof of his employment history, his gardening certifications, his clean record. I met him at the reception desk. "Samuel, thank you for coming." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood." I led him to my office and gestured to the chair. "Please sit." He sat his back straight, his hands gripping the folder. I folded my hands on the desk. "Samuel, you saved this family. Without your honesty, we would have lost everything. Marcus and Natalie would have stolen $18 million and we would have been left with nothing. Samuel shook his head. I was just doing what was right, ma'am. That's exactly why you're here. I slid a folder across the desk. I'm offering you a position as property manager. You'll oversee our 3 largest real estate holdings, the same properties Marcus tried to steal. Samuel's eyes widened. The salary is $75,000 per year, 3 times what you earned as a gardener. You'll also receive a $20,000 bonus as compensation for your wrongful termination. Full health insurance for your family, medical, dental, vision. Paid vacation. Retirement plan. You start next Monday. Samuel stared at the papers, his hands trembling. Tears filled his eyes. Mrs. Blackwood, I don't know what to say. Say yes. He looked up, his voice thick. Yes, of course, thank you. I stood and extended my hand. Honesty and integrity are rare, Samuel. I need people like you. He stood and shook my hand, tears streaming down his face. I won't let you down, ma'am. I know you won't. Now go home and tell your wife the good news. He left the office with a smile I hadn't seen in 2 months. 3 days later, on Thursday afternoon, Samuel returned, but this time he wasn't alone. My assistant knocked. Mrs. Blackwood, Samuel Brooks is here. He brought his family. I smiled. Send them in. Samuel entered, first his hand guiding a petite woman with kind eyes. Behind her were 2 children, a girl about 8 with braided hair and a boy about 6 clutching a toy truck. Mrs. Blackwood, Samuel said proudly, this is my wife Maria and our children Sophia and Daniel. Maria stepped forward, extending her hand. Mrs. Blackwood, thank you. Samuel told us everything. We're so grateful. I shook her hand. Samuel earned this. Little Daniel tugged on his mother's hand. Mama, is this where Papa works now? Maria smiled. Yes, mijo. I knelt down. Would you like to see where your Papa will be working? His eyes widened. He nodded. I led them to the property management office, a corner space with large windows overlooking downtown Phoenix. The desk was already set up, computer phone, a nameplate that read, Samuel Brooks, Director of Real Estate. Samuel stopped in the doorway, staring. This is yours, I said. He stepped inside, slowly running his hand over the desk. Maria stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Sophia looked up at me. Is my Papa really in charge of all those buildings? He is, I said. 3 very important properties. Samuel turned to me, his eyes wet. Mrs. Blackwood, I don't know how to thank you. You already have. You told the truth when it mattered most. Maria wiped her eyes. We were so scared these past 2 months. Samuel couldn't find work. We were behind on rent. I didn't know how we'd feed the kids. And now, she looked around the office, overcome. Now you're safe, I said. And Samuel has a future here. Daniel tugged on my sleeve. Miss Dorothy, are you the boss of everyone? I laughed. I suppose I am. Then you're really nice, he said seriously. My Papa said you're the nicest boss in the whole world. I glanced at Samuel, who smiled sheepishly. Your Papa is pretty special too, I told Daniel. As they left that afternoon, Sophia skipping ahead, Daniel clutching his truck, Maria holding Samuel's hand, I watched them disappear into the elevator. Barbara Simmons appeared beside me. That was a good thing you did, Dorothy. It was the right thing, I said. That evening, I found Richard in the study. He sat in the armchair holding an old photograph, him and Marcus, at their college graduation 15 years ago. I sat beside him. You've been looking at that all day. Richard set the photo down. How do I trust anyone again, Mom? I took his hand. You start by remembering the people who didn't betray you. Samuel risked everything to tell the truth. Howard worked day and night to protect this family. Frank investigated without hesitation. Barbara kept the company running. These are the people in your life, Richard. Richard was quiet. But how do I know who to trust? You watch their actions, I said, not their words. Samuel could have stayed silent. He didn't. That's character. Richard nodded slowly. I want to focus on the company. Prove I can lead. I squeezed his hand. You already have, son. You faced the truth when it hurt most. A small smile formed, the first I'd seen in days. We'll get through this, I said. Together. Together, he repeated. Outside the desert, evening turned the sky orange and purple. And for the first time since that Monday morning, I felt hope. 1 year later, September arrived with the same dry heat that had marked the beginning of everything. I stood in the conference room at Blackwood Manufacturing looking out at the faces of my senior staff. The room was full 25 employees, all watching me with expressions of quiet pride. A year ago, this company had been on the brink of collapse. Marcus Donovan and Natalie Prescott had conspired to steal $18 million in assets. My son had been betrayed by his closest friend and his wife. I had nearly lost everything I'd built. Today we were celebrating. "Good morning, everyone," I began. "I want to start by thanking each of you for an extraordinary year. Our revenue has increased by 25%. We've secured 3 major contracts with clients in California and Nevada. We've expanded our operations and hired 15 new employees. This success belongs to all of you." There was applause. I smiled. "Today, I'm pleased to announce 2 promotions." I continued. "First, Richard Blackwood has been promoted to Chief Operating Officer. He will oversee all day-to-day operations and lead our strategic planning initiatives." More applause. Richard stood from his seat near the front, nodding humbly. He'd changed over the past year. The pain of betrayal had sharpened him, made him more discerning, more careful. He no longer trusted blindly. He verified everything. "Second," I said, "I'm honored to present our Employee of the Year award to Samuel Brooks, Director of Real Estate." The room erupted in applause. Samuel stood, his face flushed with surprise and pride. He walked to the front, shaking my hand as I handed him the engraved plaque. "Samuel," I said, turning to address the room, "came to me 1 year ago with information that saved this company. He had been wrongfully terminated for telling the truth. Today, he oversees a real estate portfolio worth over $20 million. His integrity, his honesty, and his dedication are the qualities we value most at Blackwood Manufacturing." Samuel's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you all. I'm just grateful for the second chance. Integrity matters. Doing the right thing matters. I'm proud to be part of this team." The applause continued as Samuel returned to his seat. After the meeting, Richard followed me to my office. He closed the door behind him and sat across from my desk. "Congratulations, COO," I said with a smile. He smiled back, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about this past year. I imagine you have. I've learned to build teams differently now," he said. "I don't trust people just because they're friendly or because they've been around for a long time. I verify credentials. I check references. I watch for red flags. Trust has to be earned through actions, not words." I nodded. "That's wisdom, Richard. Hard-earned, but real. Marcus taught me a painful lesson," he said quietly, "but it made me stronger. I know who I am now. I know what I'm capable of." "You've become the leader I always knew you could be," I said. He looked down at his hands. "I still think about him sometimes, and Natalie, but I don't miss them. I miss the versions of them I thought they were. They made their choices," I said, "and we made ours. We chose honesty, we chose integrity, and look where we are now." Richard nodded. "I'm proud of what we've built. So am I." After Richard left, I sat alone in my office looking out at the Phoenix skyline. Barbara Simmons had become one of our most trusted leaders. Howard Brennan continued to serve as our legal counsel. Frank Morrison still handled sensitive investigations when needed. Samuel Brooks had exceeded every expectation. The right people had stayed. The wrong ones had left. I thought back to that Monday morning 1 year ago, the Lyft ride. Samuel's nervous voice. The words that had changed everything. "Mrs. Blackwood, I think you should know something about your daughter-in-law." I had built my empire on 2 principles: trust your instincts and verify everything. Today I knew I had been right. Sunday evening settled over Paradise Valley with the quiet hum of cicadas and the fading light of the Arizona desert. I sat at my desk in the study, the same desk where I'd planned the confrontation with Marcus and Natalie 1 year ago. Tonight, the room felt different. Peaceful. I opened my leather journal and uncapped my pen. September 15th, 1 year since the crisis began. Richard has grown into a man I barely recognize, stronger, wiser, more careful. He no longer seeks a romantic relationship. He says he's complete on his own, that he needs to prove to himself he can lead without needing someone else to validate him. I'm proud of him. The pain taught him what comfort never could. I paused, looking out the window at the darkening sky. Samuel Brooks risked everything to tell the truth. He lost his job, his income, his sense of security. Today, he's the director of real estate overseeing a portfolio worth $20 million. His family is stable. His integrity never wavered. I'm grateful every day that he climbed into that lift and told me what he knew. I turned the page. As for Marcus and Natalie, I'm no longer angry. I feel only pity. They chose short-term gain over long-term integrity. They thought they could build a life on lies and theft. Now Marcus is in Texas working a mid-level accounting job. Natalie is in California alone. They lost everything that mattered: trust, family, respect. I forgive them. Not for them, but for me. Anger is a weight I don't need to carry. I looked at the photograph on my desk. It wasn't the old family portrait with Richard, Natalie, and Marcus. That one had been taken down months ago. This photograph was new, taken at the company's summer picnic 3 months ago. It showed me Richard Samuel's wife, Maria, and their 2 young children, 8-year-old Sophia and 6-year-old Daniel. We were all smiling, standing under a monsoon gray sky with paper plates of barbecue in our hands. Family isn't just blood, I thought. It's loyalty. It's love. It's standing together when everything falls apart. The doorbell rang. I closed the journal and walked to the front door. Richard stood on the porch dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. "Mom," he said with a smile. "Samuel invited us to dinner at his house. Maria made tamales." I smiled back. "That sounds wonderful." Richard stepped inside his expression, turning serious. "I want to thank you, Mom, for teaching me that the truth always hurts, but it's better than a sweet lie. I hated hearing what Marcus and Natalie had done, but you forced me to face it, and it saved me." I reached out and squeezed his hand. "You learned the hard way, but you learned." "I did," he said quietly, "and I'm grateful. For you, for Samuel, for everyone who stood by us." "Me too," I said. We walked to the car together. As Richard drove us through the quiet streets of Paradise Valley towards Samuel's home, I thought about the past year, the betrayal, the confrontation, the legal battles, the pain, but also the recovery, the promotions, the awards, the loyalty of people like Samuel, Barbara, Howard, and Frank. Richard had asked me once, "How do I trust anyone again?" The answer I realize now wasn't to stop trusting. It was to trust wisely, to verify, to watch for actions, not just words, to value integrity above all else, and to remember that trust isn't about never being hurt. It's about knowing who will still stand beside you when the pain comes. And as the desert night fell over Paradise Valley, Dorothy Blackwood closed her journal knowing that betrayal had tested her family but could not defeat them. Because in the end, trust isn't about never being hurt. It's about knowing who will still stand beside you when the pain comes. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize how close I came to losing not just my fortune, but my son. Family drama stories like mine teach us that betrayal often comes from those we trust most. I want to share this with you. Don't be like I was. Don't trust blindly, even when someone has been family for 15 years. God gave me 2 gifts that saved us: instinct and discernment. The first time Samuel told me about Natalie and Marcus, God whispered, "Listen." I listened. When I wanted to ignore the pain, God whispered again, "Verify." I verified. And when I faced Marcus in that room, God gave me strength to choose justice over revenge. These grandma stories aren't just about business or money. They're about character. I've learned that integrity is the only currency that never loses value. Family drama stories can destroy you if you let bitterness take root, but they can also make you wiser if you choose forgiveness. My advice to you: trust but verify everything. Watch people's actions, not their words. Build your life with those who stand beside you when storms come, not those who smile only in sunshine. And remember, grandma stories like mine exist to remind you that even when betrayal tests you, God provides people like Samuel Brooks to help you survive. Richard learned the hardest lesson of his life, but it shaped him into a man of integrity. Grandma stories pass down wisdom through pain. Family drama stories teach what comfort never can. That's my legacy now, not just a company, but the truth that loyalty, honesty, and faith in God matter more than money. So learn from my mistakes, protect your family, trust wisely. Final note. This content contains dramatized storytelling elements for educational purposes. Some details are fictionalized, but the lessons and messages are entirely valuable. If the style doesn't suit you, that's okay. Please feel free to seek content that better fits your needs.